In The Power of Now, Eckhart has quite beautifully expressed how Rinanubandhan can be mitigated. Of course, he does not use those terms, but I will just read out a small passage here where he says, this is from the book The Power of Now, when you are fully present and people around you manifest unconscious behavior, you won't feel the need to react to it, so you don't give it any reality. Your peace is so vast and deep that anything that is not peace disappears into it as if it had never existed. This breaks the karmic cycle of action and reaction. This is so true, because what sustains action and reaction is the sense of doership. I did something, he or she did something, this is what he is telling me, therefore I should tell him or her this in response, in retaliation. So what keeps the Rina going, the bandhan, the bondage of the Rina, is the action-reaction loop. That is why arguments, conflicts, they keep getting sustenance from this tennis match which two people are playing, each striking the ball even harder. So the way to look at these relationships, if they are looked at through the prism of non-doership, then the rules of the game change. One is no longer in this action-reaction mode of always having to prove one's point, prove that one's viewpoint is correct, one's viewpoint is superior, because there is the full understanding that everyone is made exactly the way the divine has made them, their genes, their conditioning and their nature. Therefore, they are bound to express themselves the way they are, because that is how they have been made, just like you have been made. So, this opposition starts reducing, and the light of presence, which Nisargadatta Maharaj called conscious presence, shines through. That is exactly what Eckhart is referring to in this book. Because if the full understanding is that nobody truly does anything, you no longer blame and condemn or hate others or judge them for something they are supposed to have done. And then the grip which the Rina had, the bandhan, starts dissolving, starts lessening, because that need is no longer there to prove one's point. You teach through being, through demonstrating the peace of God. You become the light of the world, an emanation of pure consciousness, and so you eliminate suffering on the level of cause. This is exactly it, because the light of I am, the light of presence, the light of consciousness shines through when the thinking mind is absent. The thinking mind, which is going into a dead past or an imaginary future, no longer does that. So the clutches of the mind start loosening their grip. The grip is lost. And when the mind, the thinking mind, is not going all over the place, what is naturally present is the conscious presence, which is the light. the now. So this is the way it is brought into relationships, through understanding. Maharaj used to say 3 words: understanding is all. You see, because if we try to prove that we are right, we are playing God, little realizing that both of us, the person in front of me and myself, are objects in manifestation. But we have usurped the subjectivity of the source and think we are the subject and that is the object. And we start saying, this is my view, this is my opinion, as if I know everything. But I am simply an instrument just like the other, through whom the same consciousness functions. So if this understanding is there deep down in one of the two, then that action-reaction loop will not get sustenance. Because if you are the witnessing presence, which is not identified with a sense of doership, then that person will not play that game. When that person does not play that game, there is nothing to perpetuate the Rinanubandhan further on. It has nothing to drive itself on further unless there's again conflict and again it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So this is the way out of a toxic relationship with others and with oneself. And in a few lines before, which I will read out, Eckhart makes a similar point where he says, "You may remember that we talked about the dual nature of true compassion, which is awareness of a common bond of shared mortality and immortality. At this deep level, compassion becomes healing in the widest sense. In that state, your healing influence is primarily based not on doing but on being." This is non-doership. In that state, your healing influence is primarily based not on doing but on being. Everybody you come in contact with will be touched by your presence and affected by the peace that you emanate, whether they are conscious of it or not. So this again points to abiding in the I am, as Maharaj would say. And the abidance in the I am is when the me is not involved as the thinking mind. Because if the me that is involved as the thinking mind with a sense of doership is in abeyance, what shines is the conscious presence, which is the power of now. So in the ultimate analysis, there is nothing you can do to be present, because the doing is done by the me which thinks it is the doer. Otherwise, Eckhart would not say, to repeat, in that state, your healing influence is primarily based not on doing but on being. So if you ask me, this is ultimately a teaching of non-doership, like the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, the ego deludeth, thinketh I am the doer. Or Ramakrishna Paramhans, whose teaching was based on non-doership. Or the Buddha, events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer of any deed. which is what my own spiritual teacher Ramesh Balsekar would say all the time. So this is expressed very beautifully by Eckhart, and it is going at the root of Indian spiritual thought. Rinanubandhan is not spoken about much. There is very little literature on it, but it is the sense of doership which keeps it going, and the state of being is a state of not doing, which is the way to mitigate the Rina.